linked to it, we're going to speak to Peter Kirkham now. Peter, well known in this parish, of course, former Detective Chief Inspector with the Met Police. Before I ask you about what we actually got you on to talk about, which is restrictions placed on police leave because of Brexit, can I just ask you about, you're obviously going to say, I would imagine, that austerity is partly to blame for this, but what do you think is the single underlying cause of this extreme spike in violence, Peter?
There is no single underlying cause. All the things you've just mentioned when you were talking to Claire, was it your last caller? All of those things, to some extent, in some areas, in some individual cases, and the reasons why any individual kid gets involved in things will vary quite significantly. There'll be some themes, but broadly speaking, each case is sort of on its own merits, and different aspects are more or less serious. But the reason that it has exploded is simple, and that is austerity, or rather the cuts that have been made using austerity as an excuse.
Really?
Yeah. The police have been cut, so police presence on the streets has removed the suppression of street crime, not just the knife carrying and the violence, but the drug dealing and street crime that it comes from, that it's associated with.
Okay,
so out of control.
The Prime Minister says there's no direct correlation between police numbers and crime. I know you were going to disagree with that. So what did you think of it? So Sajid Javid made some kind of warmish, lukewarm noises in support of the police, and then immediately got slapped down by the Chancellor, who said that police chiefs should be used, quote, existing resources to tackle the problem by diverting cash from other budgets. What do you make of that?
Hammond's on a different planet. He's deluded if he thinks the police have got anything that isn't falling apart already. There is nothing that the police are doing and are expected to do and are told to do that isn't already starting to fall apart. Response times are down. Investigations, loads of things are not getting investigated, and those that aren't getting investigated as well as they can. Clear-up rates are down, even for murder. The whole of policing is falling apart. They have removed the little bit of contingency capacity and resilience that there was there to start with. They have failed to resource all the things that have become major problems, either because we've recognised them more, so things like child sexual exploitation and modern slavery, or things that have just grown because technology has changed, so online crime, online fraud and whatever. So they've failed to resource them as they've grown. They've failed to recognise that everything is failing totally all around us. And so 999 calls aren't getting the response. Crimes aren't getting investigated. There is nothing that has got cops sitting around doing nothing that can be moved onto this. The much vaunted serious violence crime task force in London, I think it's 650 officers that are said to be on it. There's about 150 of those that are actually on it on a permanent basis. All of those have been nicked from somewhere else, including quite a few from cyber fraud. The rest are there on a day-by-day basis, called in as aid from outer boroughs. And so the government are going, well, why aren't the police sorting this out? Sort of off the record. They're going, well, when we've had problems like this before, the police have just thrown a load of resources at it. They haven't got any.
The landscape's changed. Just one final thing on this. And, are there people, or will there be people working within the police force and other agencies who are sort of undercover on the internet? Because this is where these kind of the gang beefs start, isn't it, as I understand it?
A handful.
Not many.
They do try and monitor gang social media, for want of a better description. They do try and keep an eye on that, but very little will be done proactively. It'll tend to be done when something is reported or comes to light of a police officer. I know myself and other ex-officers, if we happen to see something, we'll report that in, and you know, where they can, they'll reinvestigate, or they'll investigate that. But there's not loads of people sitting there monitoring on a 24/7 basis now.
Okay. No, I thought not. And the reason we got you on, last but not least, this report that has, whether it's a leak or not, it's a document from the National Police Coordination Centre. Met Police has placed restrictions on the amount of leave officers can take in order to deal with issues arising from Brexit, or indeed a no-deal Brexit. That's another punch in the guts, isn't it?
It is. And to be honest, if there is disorder around Brexit, and I fear that there will be to some extent, whatever happens, whether it's delayed, whether we go, whether we stay, whatever happens, I suspect there'll be some sort of disorder, some sort of unrest and protest around it. Whatever happens, the police are not going to be able to cope with it for the same reason we've just been talking about. There are none. There are no extra officers. There's no bottomless Bobby box. There's no officers sitting around doing things that nobody cares about, except writing reports for HMIC and for the government. To be honest, if I was a chief constable, I'd just stop doing that wholesale and say, no, we haven't got time to do all this admin nonsense, so let's put them all back on the street. But even that wouldn't even scratch the surface of what's needed. But the bottom line is, all that this is going to do now is going to demoralise and burn out officers even further. We have got sickness through the roof with stress-related sickness. We have got ill health retirements. We've got people who are leaving early out of choice because of the impact it's having on them and their families. They're getting the threat of divorce and you know, it's the job or it's me and your family. Yeah. And so everything, I've used the metaphor before about all the red warning lights on the dashboard. They're all flashing red and the klaxons now start.
It's not a great recruitment post.
The organisation is falling apart.
I want to just ask you one final question while you are actually. We're going to be talking about Shamima Begum and whether she should have been allowed home, etc., etc. Do you think she should have been allowed home? Do you think she should now be allowed home? Have we let her down?
Above my pay grade, to be honest, and above the pay grade of the police. That's an international sort of issue, right. and the statelessness thing is an issue.
Would you be concerned about her being here as some kind of threat or sort of martyr magnet?
Yeah, I'm tempted to the opinion that if it was the other way round and she wasn't our problem, everybody would be jumping up and down saying send her home. Yeah. So she's our problem, so I would tend towards the fact one way or another she's going to have to be back here, and then it's going to be the same headache as it is with all the rest of them trying to keep a bit of an eye on them.
Peter, as always, pleasure to speak to you. Peter Kirkham, very honest in his